Hello PEI, thank you for stopping by.
Absolutely. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and right out of the gate, I really need to send a massive warm thank you to our show producer and curator, Mike Montague.
Oh, yeah. Mike's the best.
He really is. He's a RE/MAX Charlottetown realtor and just, honestly, a massive, undeniable lover of PEI Lobster. He actually pitched the idea for this deep dive and put all these sources together.
And he brought some really fascinating material to the table today.
He did, because, he handed me this stack of research today that completely shattered how I view his favorite food. Because if you lived on Prince Edward Island in the 1800s, feeding someone a lobster was actually written into contracts as cruel and unusual punishment.
It's wild to think about.
Right. So today, we're going to dive into the unique biology that makes it like a literal superfood.
Yeah.
And we're also looking at how a recent provincial cabinet resignation perfectly illustrates these ironclad laws keeping international corporations completely locked out of the island's waters.
It really is a remarkable trajectory. The story of PEI lobster, it isn't just about a local food turning into a luxury item.
Right.
We are really looking at an incredible piece of structural design.
Okay, structural design. How so?
Well, we're talking about how a cherished, highly lucrative island tradition has been shielded both mechanically and legally from the massive corporate forces that usually just, swallow up this kind of wealth in other parts of the world.
Right, right. I want to start with that historical whiplash, though, because the contrast is just staggering to me.
Oh, it's huge.
Today, lobster's the crown jewel of fine dining. But in the 19th century, it was basically considered trash. They literally used it as fertilizer for potato fields.
I'm trying to wrap my head around how human psychology flips an entire society's perception from, a pesky garden weed into a priceless truffle.
Well, it really comes down to the psychology of scarcity and effort. So in the 1800s, there was zero scarcity. The sheer volume of lobster washing ashore after severe Atlantic storms was just overwhelming.
Oh, wow. Just washing up on the beach.
Yeah. When a resource washes up in rotting piles on the beach, human nature dictates that it has no intrinsic value. It's perceived as a bottom-feeding nuisance.
So the abundance actually worked against its reputation.
Exactly. People were feeding it to prisoners and indentured servants simply because it was the cheapest, easiest calorie available.
So, okay, if the sheer abundance made it worthless locally, how does the transition to a high-end commodity actually happen? Because, you can't just throw a marketing campaign at prison food and expect people to pay top dollar.
Right. No, you need distance, both geographic and psychological. And that distance was provided by the convergence of two major 19th century developments.
Commercial canning and the expansion of the railway system. So canning was a massive technological breakthrough that solved the biological decomposition problem. For the first time, you could process the meat, seal it in a tin, and prevent it from spoiling.
Which means you can now ship it inland.
Precisely.
You're physically separating the food from the coastal stigma. So the person eating it in, like Montreal or Toronto, didn't just walk past a pile of rotting shells on the beach.
That is the crucial shift right there. The railway networks brought wealthy inland tourists to the coasts, and it carried the canned product deep into North America.
So to an inland consumer, this wasn't an ocean cockroach.
No, to them it was an exotic, sweet seafood delicacy from the distant Maritimes. Canning popularized the flavor profile, sure, but the tourists and the geographic distance elevated its social status.
It's an incredible rebrand. It reminds me of how certain cuts of meat, like a brisket or pork belly, they used to be the cheapest throwaway cuts for the working class.
Oh, totally.
Until high-end chefs realized how to prepare them, and suddenly they cost a fortune. But the sources show things escalated even further in the 1920s, right?
Yeah. The 1920s introduced the motorized boat, which completely altered the economics of the catch. Fishers were no longer restricted to the immediate shallow shoreline.
Because they had engines now.
Exactly. They could push further out into deeper, colder waters, and that birthed the live export market.
Which changes the game entirely. Because shipping a live creature is a massive logistical headache compared to shipping a tin can.
It is, yeah.
But it allows for the introduction of the live tank at high-end restaurants. It becomes this whole visual spectacle.
Right. The live export market basically weaponized the psychology of freshness. When a diner selects a live lobster from a tank, they are participating in the illusion of the catch.
Oh, that's interesting.
It signals ultimate exclusivity, and it justifies a massive price premium. That shift from canned to live export laid the direct foundation for the billion-dollar industry PEI operates today.
Okay, so if we are pulling hundreds of millions of dollars out of the water today, what exactly is the modern consumer paying for? Because historically, luxury foods like foie gras or caviar, they're rich, heavy, and frankly, not great for you.
Right.
But the research Mike put together insists that lobster completely defies the luxury food rulebook.
It really does. The biological realities of the PEI lobster are just fascinating. The cold, nutrient-dense waters of the North Atlantic act as a natural growth inhibitor.
Yep.
The lobsters grow much slower than they would in warmer waters, and that slower growth cycle produces incredibly dense, highly mineralized muscle tissue.
Wait, hold on. So you're telling me that this decadent luxury item is actually a smarter, leaner health choice than standard chicken or beef?
I am.
Because when I picture a traditional PEI lobster supper, it is drowning in melted butter.
Oh, yeah.
Served alongside thick potato salad and massive rolls, like, how is that a lean choice?
So you have to separate the biology of the animal from the cultural dressing we put around it. The meat itself is remarkably lean because lobsters don't marble their fat into their muscle tissue the way a cow or a pig does.
Oh, really? Where does it go?
They store their fat entirely in the tamale.
The tamale.
Yeah, that's the liver and pancreas organ. If you are just eating the tail and claw meat, a standard 3-ounce serving is only 90 calories.
Wow, 90 calories is almost nothing for a protein source.
And it packs 19 grams of lean protein into those 90 calories.
That's crazy.
But more importantly, because of that slow growth in cold water we talked about, the tissue acts like a mineral sponge. It contains 9 times more zinc than a comparable serving of salmon.
9 times.
9 times. It is loaded with selenium and copper, which are vital components for thyroid function and immune health. The decadence is entirely a human invention, the butter, the rolls. The raw material itself is a nutritional powerhouse.
Okay, so we have a multi-million-dollar economic engine that is harvesting a highly desirable zinc-packed superfood. And the scale of this engine is staggering. Looking at the 2024 data, the PEI fleet harvested over 40 million pounds of lobster.
40 million pounds, yeah.
Yeah.
Generating a landed value of over $358 million.
Right. And with the 2026 spring season slated to launch between April 25th and April 28th, I want to talk about where that $358 million actually goes.
It's a huge injection.
It is. Because in a province the size of Prince Edward Island, an influx of that much capital in a short seasonal window has to fundamentally alter the local ecosystem.
Oh, it touches every single sector of the island's economy. That $358 million in landed value isn't getting locked away in some offshore corporate account.
Right.
It is handed directly to the independent fishers at the dock. And then they turn around and use that capital to buy gear at the local hardware stores, purchase new trucks from local dealerships, and spend money in local grocery stores.
It's a massive, immediate injection of liquidity.
Exactly. It sustains communities through the off-season.
And it anchors the entire culinary and tourism industry. The sources give us some great boots-on-the-ground examples of how this catch is served up in and around Charlottetown.
Definitely.
You have places like Merchant Man, Fresh Seafood, and Oyster Bar, which really leans into that high-end luxury rebrand we talked about earlier.
Right. And then you have establishments like Water Prince Corner Shop, which offers a completely different, unpretentious vibe. It connects the diner directly to the working waterfront culture.
Oh, I love places like that.
Same. Then there's Lobster on the Wharf, which utilizes the actual harbor logistics for its atmosphere. But if you want to understand the true cultural integration of this industry, you really have to look at the traditional new Glasgow lobster suppers.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the lobster suppers because it's such a specific style of dining. It's communal, it's abundant, it feels almost like a massive family gathering. Why did that specific dining format evolve on PEI?
Well, the community lobster supper originally evolved as a practical solution to a massive logistical problem.
Really? A logistical problem?
Yeah. In the mid-20th century, before modern industrial refrigeration and rapid global shipping were perfected, local communities sometimes had more catch than they could easily preserve or export.
Oh, so they just had too much lobster.
Exactly. So churches and community halls began hosting these massive all-you-can-eat suppers as fundraisers.
That is so smart.
It was a highly efficient way to move excess inventory while generating funds for community infrastructure. It basically hardwired the food into the social and philanthropic fabric of the island.
It's brilliant. You solve a supply chain issue by creating a beloved cultural tradition. But this brings us to a massive point of friction.
Right.
When you have a local resource generating $358 million in direct landed value, yielding a highly desirable superfood and deeply woven into the local culture, it becomes a giant target.
Oh, absolutely.
Because private equity firms and international conglomerates, they exist to find local wealth like this and extract it.
Wealth attracts wealth. And historically, when a localized industry becomes this lucrative, corporate consolidation is almost inevitable. Massive companies swoop in, buy up the local licenses, centralize the profits, and turn independent operators into low-wage employees.
Right. Which brings us to the recent resignation of PEI Transportation Minister Sidney McEwen.
Yes, the McEwen situation.
Now, okay, let's unpack this. Because to anyone outside of Prince Edward Island, seeing a cabinet minister step down over a commercial asset immediately sounds like a standard political scandal.
Right.
Like, is this just another standard politician double-dipping story? Why should you, the listener, care beyond the basic optics?
Yeah, that is the standard political trope, but applying it here completely misses the reality of the situation.
Okay.
This isn't a scandal about hiding assets. It is a live demonstration of the survival mechanics of the PEI lobster industry.
Survival mechanics.
Yes. Sidney McEwen owns a commercial lobster license, and the friction arises from two conflicting sets of legislation that simply cannot coexist.
Let's unpack the specific legal friction. What exactly are the two laws colliding here?
Okay, so on the provincial level, Prince Edward Island has strict conflict of interest guidelines for its elected officials. If you are elevated to a cabinet position, you are legally required to place your major business assets into a blind trust.
Right, which makes sense. The logic is sound. If a third party manages the asset without your knowledge, you cannot use your cabinet position to enact policies that personally enrich you.
Exactly. A blind trust is the standard ethical firewall in modern politics. It solves the problem in almost every other industry.
But not lobster.
No, because the lobster industry is governed federally by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the DFO. And the DFO licensing rules explicitly and aggressively forbid a commercial fishing license from being placed into a blind trust.
Wow. So McEwen is trapped in a perfect legal paradox.
Completely trapped.
The province says you must use a blind trust to sit at the cabinet table. The federal government says if you use a blind trust, you forfeit your fishing license entirely. So he chose the boat over the cabinet table. But why is the DFO so uncompromising on this? Like, why is a blind trust, which is supposed to be an ethical tool, considered a threat to the fishery?
Well, this gets to the absolute core of how PEI protects its wealth. The DFO regulation is based on something called the owner-operator principle.
The owner-operator principle.
Yeah, it is a decades-old legislative shield. The mandate dictates that the person whose name is on the commercial fishing license must be the physical human being standing on the deck of the boat, hauling the traps out of the water.
Oh, wow. It's like a taxi medallion system, but functioning perfectly.
Exactly.
Because in a lot of cities, you have taxi medallions where the owner is legally required to be the driver of the car. It prevents a massive corporation from buying up like 500 medallions and renting them out to desperate drivers for minimum wage.
That is the perfect analogy. And the reason a blind trust is forbidden by the DFO is that a blind trust masks ownership. If the DFO allowed fishing licenses to be placed in trusts, a multinational private equity firm could easily set up 50 different shell companies or blind trusts, buy up 50 local licenses, and obscure the fact that one corporation owns a massive chunk of the fishery.
And once they own the licenses, they aren't getting on the boats themselves.
Never. This is the nightmare scenario the industry calls the slipper skipper.
The slipper skipper.
Yeah. A slipper skipper is a wealthy investor or a corporate entity who sits in a penthouse in Toronto or New York wearing their slippers while hiring minimum wage crews to do the incredibly dangerous, backbreaking work out on the Atlantic.
So this rule acts like a firewall against a corporate hostile takeover of the ocean.
Exactly. If that loophole were ever opened, the wealth extraction would be immediate.
Because a private equity firm has access to billions in capital. They would flood the local market, offer independent fishers massive payouts for their licenses, and within a decade, the entire fleet would be corporatized.
And once a corporation buys a license, it never returns to the local market. Because corporations don't retire. They don't pass the business down to their children.
Right.
If that happens, that $358 million in landed value stops circulating through the hardware stores and truck dealerships of Prince Edward Island. It is immediately siphoned off to global shareholders.
The multi-generational family-run businesses that form the cultural backbone of the island would be wiped out overnight.
Gone.
You'd transform proud, independent business owners into gig economy workers on their own waters.
The entire economic autonomy of the region would collapse. That is why the owner-operator principle must remain absolutely rigid.
Wow.
The DFO cannot allow even a single exception, not even for a sitting provincial cabinet minister, because the moment you establish a legal precedent for a blind trust in the fishery, corporate lawyers will use that precedent to tear the doors off the industry.
So by resigning, McEwen is actually reinforcing that firewall. His resignation isn't a failure of the system. It is proof that the system is functioning exactly as intended.
Exactly. It is a stress test of the legislation, and the legislation held firm. It proves that the protection of this resource is far more important than any individual's political trajectory.
It is a remarkable triumph of local legislative design.
Yeah.
The rules actually recognize that the wealth of the fishery belongs to the people doing the labor in the communities that support it.
Yeah, it's really inspiring when you look at it that way.
It is an incredible arc to process. I mean, we started with a creature so abundant, it was used as fertilizer and considered a punishment to eat.
Right.
Then we watched the convergence of canning technology and railway expansion completely flip its psychological value from trash to an exotic luxury.
Yeah.
We dug into the cold water biology that turns it into a slow-growing, highly mineralized superfood that pumps hundreds of millions of dollars into a local economy.
It's amazing.
And we see that all of it, the restaurants, the seasonal economic heartbeat, the local culture, is safeguarded by an untouchable legal principle that forces the owners to physically work the traps.
It is a masterclass in how to protect regional resources from global extraction.
It really is.
And it leaves you with a vital question to consider about the broader world. If the rigid, uncompromising owner-operator rule is the single piece of architecture standing between a thriving, independent local community and total corporate overrun on PEI, what other local industries, agricultural traditions, or regional resources around the world are currently being hollowed out right now simply because they lack this kind of untouchable legislative armor?
That is a phenomenal question to end on, and it really forces you to look at the hidden architecture behind the local economies in your own backyard. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Keep questioning the stories behind the food on your plate, keep looking closely at the mechanisms protecting your local businesses, and we will catch you on the next one.